seen the sector learn from the crisis. One of the other comments he made was this oft-mentioned quote, don't waste a crisis and never waste a good crisis. And so the fact that there are lessons that one learns and make sure, intuitively what comes to mind, Sriram, is the fact and the speed at which the Maligram committee was set up, the promptness in putting the machinery in place for the MFI bill, even though it did not pass. It gave significant credibility to the sector. It also clearly told state governments that this is something that is going to be looked at a national level. The ability to be able to quickly put out other ecosystem plays, the NBFC MFI category, opening up of ECBs, allowing of PSL color on these assets. And so a whole lot of confidence building measures that seem to have happened. And whether you look at it within the Indian investor context or you look at it in the global context, pretty much the whole world's focus was on Andhra Pradesh for that moment, and then, as he mentioned, across the Indian microfinance sector, because the banks did not stop lending only to Andhra MFIs, but pretty much across the board in those immediate months after that ordinance. And so when you look at it with a global lens again, I think clearly the confidence seems to have come back into the sector. But looking at it in the context really of the panel today, which is talking about also the new guidelines of the More Committee, and of course on the back of the recent World Cup, I'm sure many of you here who are yawning, possibly because of the food, but some have also had short sleep over the last few days, would like to summarize the 3 S's from the World Cup final. Suarez from the World Cup, Schweinsteiger and Shakira. And I'll go a little more in detail on those 3 S's to give you a sense of how I see the microfinance sector evolving. Suarez really showed us that we need to have a little more teeth in the regulation. And I think that's coming out as we see the SRO and the other things that are being. And so really when we look at the broader architecture, I want to talk about maybe Pakistan, because I was invited by the central bank there. And you look at really the architecture being laid out, and we see you have an NGO MFI, you then have something called, you have a big gap, then you have the MFI bank, and then you have the commercial bank. In India, you have the NGO MFI, then you have the NBFC MFI, and then you have commercial bank. And everyone's sort of one day wanting to be there. Bandhan now seems to have been able to make that leap. But are we really, if we are honest enough among ourselves, saying, would there be many such banks? And the answer is unlikely, given where we are seeing the whole context. So this need for an MFI bank, that missing step to really go from, say, kindergarten to primary, and then straight you can't graduate. The secondary section seems to be missing in the Indian MFI architecture. And so hopefully these new payment banks or differentiated banks or possibly low capitalized MFI banks would be that step to be able to be there. And the last S.